implementing partners need to have a monitoring and reporting system built into their intervention design from the earliest moments. Now, there are many elements that are essential to making up a monitoring and reporting system, but here we'll just focus on some which experience tells us are particularly essential and pertinent. Okay, we're going to analyze these under the heading structure, resources, tools, and systems, which is always a good classification for understanding, if you like, an organizational capacity relative to particular functions. And here the function is monitoring and reporting. The first thing is there needs to be a structure. And by structure, we mean definition of roles, definition of responsibilities about who is to monitor and what exactly the task is regarding, for example, data gathering from activities, regarding, for example, identifying the emergence of results from within components of a project, regarding internal reporting, internal meaning internal to the intervention, from whom, to whom, and what frequency. All of that is part of basically the structure of the monitoring system and needs to be defined at the very start. Then we come to resources, because a monitoring and reporting system is not simply something written down on a piece of paper. It needs people, and they need to be competent. So the people need, particular persons need to be assigned to the relevant monitoring and reporting roles. And it needs to be ensured that these persons understand their role and are competent to carry it out. So that may require some internal preparation, even some internal training. And then the other big question, even preceding this, is who designs the internal monitoring system? Someone has got to sit down and conceive of the system right at the start and how it will work. And here we're talking about a level of detail which goes well beyond what might often be mentioned in a few paragraphs in a programming document. Who does that? Sometimes that might require some external help, but hopefully only at the start. Then we come to tools. A monitoring system and a monitoring and reporting system requires a number of tools. Foremost among them, but it's not the only one, foremost among them is an indicator system. The indicator system involves two kinds of indicators: result indicators, which you know from log frames, and process indicators. With regard to the result indicators, the result indicators that are chosen for the indicator system, they need to include some of the main indicators taken from the action document on which the contract is based, on the contract for the intervention is based. And in turn, some of those action document indicators hopefully have derived from some of the standard sets of European Union Commission indicators, such as the EPA 3 results framework and the Global Europe results framework. There are other standard results frameworks as well. The important thing here is to ensure that some indicators from the very highest level are cascaded down through the action document and into the contracts, and therefore you, when you do your monitoring and reporting at an intervention level, you are providing data for at least some of those indicators so that that data can inform those indicators as they're aggregated up the chain to higher levels. Now, there are as well process indicators. We don't want to say too much about these other than the fact that they are not result indicators. They do not refer, therefore, to outputs, outcomes, or impacts. They tend instead to reflect the progress of implementation in terms of activities, the quality of implementation, the satisfaction participants might have who are involved in implementation, those kind of things. If I give maybe one example, it would be the number of participants involved in a particular capacity development intervention. That is not a result indicator. That simply is telling us how many people were involved. You could disaggregate that according to gender. You could also disaggregate it according to theme of capacity development. So you could have, in the end, the number of participants involved in capacity development broken down by a number of themes to which the various capacity development modules were dedicated. The implementing partner, the level of intervention for its own purposes, will require a number of these process indicators. Other tools relate to data collection, especially surveys, templates for surveys, and it's important, not to change the survey every time, to have a certain stability of questions in surveys throughout a project. Therefore, that means maybe designing some standard surveys with standard questions. In this case, because we're looking at result indicators, we will want surveys that do focus to some extent on change, on the change that has taken place, and that needs to be asked about in the questions. And then finally, we come to systems. And the key system here is to have an overall information system in which all of this data is going to come together, be processed, and be reported. Now, that is obviously some kind of database. It could be a simple Excel, could be something more complex. Some implementing partners have their own systems. But what I would say is that very often, in order to be able to report to the EU, in terms of its indicators, you may find that you do have to create a slightly specialized system to be able to do that. It is not always possible technically to realize a perfect harmonization between your own system, which may have its own purposes, and the requirements of the EU.